Okay, let's start. Any questions?
Could you explain the perturbative equation once again?
Yeah, I will redo that again. Okay. So there have been some issue. So I think it hurriedly done at the last moment. Probably there was some problem. So let us go over that again. So we have had the orbit equation written r dr by d phi, and this we rewrote as u as a 1 by r, and then we get d square u by d phi square plus u is equal to m by lz square plus 3m u square. So this was our main equation which we are trying to do. If you purely look at the Newtonian thing, then this won't be there. So we can do this perturbatively. So we can assume this term to be zero first, and then solve, and then plug back in and get the solution, successive solution. So this is a nonlinear differential equation, but we look at the Newtonian equation, that is we get d square u by d phi square plus u is equal to m by l z square. This is a simple harmonic equation with the constant as uh, source term, and that can be easily solved. You can plug it in into uh, Mathematica or whatever, but this should not take a much difficult thing. But from the orbital point of view, orbital dynamics point of view, or Kepler problem thing, the solution is usually written like this: L into 1 plus E cos phi minus phi naught. Phi naught is a constant phase where the orbit starts. You can take that to zero. That is fine. E is a eccentricity, and L and also is defined. So this is a zeroth order equation. Then there is a standard method which you follow for solving such differential equations, which we perturbatively solve. So you can, to avoid any confusion, we can put in an epsilon here to show that that is a perturbative term, and then we can write our solution as the u is equal to u naught plus epsilon into u1, first order perturbation, and then you can have any order. uh, we'll not do it because as you seen, uh, it is the easiest when it is a linear. After that it gets quite non-trivial, and then you substitute this and equate the epsilon various orders. Zeroth order would give you the Newtonian equation, and that has this solution. And then first order you can substitute. So let us do that. U du by d phi is which we are interested in. Actually, we can straight away calculate this. There is no problem. So you get d square u naught by d phi square plus epsilon times d square u1 by d phi square. So that is a main equation. And then this is a u term, there is no problem. And then the next term which we have to write it more carefully. Let's substitute this back in the differential equation. The differential equation, let me put it down again. So the epsilon there is only written for reference. It does not have any actual meaning. So to compare the proper orders, we can rewrite this equation as after substituting above this d square u by d phi square plus epsilon times d square u1 by d phi square. Uh, then you have a u itself, which is u naught plus epsilon into u1. The other term is constant here, mlz square plus 3m u square have to be calculated. Let's quickly see it. U square, when you properly expand to the first order, this is squared. To first order, it would be u square plus 2 epsilon u1 u0. You are ignoring all the higher order terms. And then you substitute here back into this. There is already an epsilon there. So only u naught square would contribute. So the rest of the term is a higher order term. So you can write that as a directly u naught square, because there is an epsilon here. Now you know that the zeroth order term, now you collect the epsilon terms. Zeroth order equation we have already solved. So let's collect the epsilon to the power 1. So you get d square u1 by d phi square plus u1 is equal to 3m u0 square. So this u0 we have here that need to be substituted. And then you need to solve this equation. Okay, so this is the, there is some extra pieces come from. Okay, so you need to solve this equation by substituting u0 square. So one can do that. It is a bit cumbersome equation, but nevertheless it can be done. And you can either do it on Mathematica or whatever this thing, or you can simply solve it. This is a harmonic term, and then your source term. You see that the first order term act as a, or zeroth order term act as a source to the first order term. That is usually what happens in the perturbative equation. Lower order solution would comes as a source term to the higher order terms. And can solve this equation. I'm not giving it because what happens is that when you solve this equation, to find out that this is a bit cumbersome, it will have a term of all orders in epsilon, not in epsilon. It's a first order in epsilon, but it has various orders in E, and you will have 3-4 terms coming together, and that is a little more general equation than what we needed, because to compute it turns out that you don't need all that first order perturbation. You need somewhat somewhere in between terms. Otherwise, you do not really get the exact order. Once you get the U1 term, we do a further approximation in terms of epsilon, not epsilon, in terms of eccentricity. The actual solution can be written, I can give that, but it would have some terms plus E into some terms plus E square into some terms. So this looks fairly cumbersome. So what one next does is, by choosing the constant, you can set this to 0, and then you ignore this term. That means you are again making an approximation of the order eccentricity to the 1. Okay, you are doing O to E order, ignore all the higher order terms. Again, that is not the right way of doing, but unfortunately, to get the precision, you have to do that. That is, once you do that, the lowest order in this, you would get an equation of solution of this type. Okay, so you can check this up, and then you can write u as 1 to the 1 by L, 1 plus E into cos phi minus phi naught. Okay, then there will be higher order in E square and term. Those we are ignoring because this order term is sufficient. In the proper first order perturbation, if you do consistently, you need all that. But somehow when you want to compute the precision, you turns out that it is not necessary to have all those terms, or rather those terms would unnecessarily mess up the calculation. So you would get a term like this. You could write this as epsilon. You can simplify this to this, where epsilon is given by 3ml into phi. So this actually tells you that the precision does happen when you take add it up. When phi turns back, it would come back to slightly different position, because you have addition to this. There is this term which is added with phi, which would give actually is the precision. Now you see that I thought that I would consistently do the first order calculation and was getting a cumbersome solution for the U1 first order term. Then I looked back into the Narlikar's book. They actually take this approximation to e to the power 1 only. So to get the exact equation for the precision. Now, if you think that, you can go back and do that approximation here itself, and then you can do that. There is a simplified way. If you don't want the full first order approximation, you can simply do your calculation in terms of expanding in terms of u. So let me do that too. So you have the equation u square d phi square into u. So it is somehow not, I'm not very happy with this, because it is like an in-between order approximation. You cannot say eccentricity is always small, because you could have a large eccentricity and the precision happening. Of course, in solar system, it might be okay. Now you see that we have a U0 solution is given as a 1 plus E cos phi minus phi naught. This is an alternative derivation. We do perturbative expansion in terms of eccentricity of orbit, and then get the solution. So then you see that you substitute back again, you get d square phi plus u is equal to m by L z square plus 3m by L square into 1 plus 2e cos phi minus phi naught, and then e square into cos square phi minus phi naught. Now you can again use a solution is like u is equal to u0 plus e into u1 plus e square into u2. You can ignore this. You take the first order in u, and then this term also will be going. So you simply get an equation, d square u1 by d phi square plus u1 is equal to, this term goes away. So you have a 6m by L square into cos, this term you would get cos phi minus phi naught, and you can solve this, and here you can readily get the equation 3m E L square into E phi into sine phi minus phi naught. So I found that this is kind of an easy shortcut method which is given in the Nadlikar's book, which is far more easy to do, but I would not say it is a fully consistent first order. We would like to, if you want to do fully consistent first order, you should be doing this, and then you would get the terms including E square and so on, but that would give little more than perturbation precision, probably give it to the second order in epsilon. So to avoid the more complicated equation, the approximation of e to the power 1 only is done, and then you obtain the precision. So is it clear? The perturbation is always a bit tricky, and when dirty approximation is done in between, then it gets even more trickier. So that is where this might be a little bit confusing. Yeah, any questions regarding this? You will have to do the calculation. Easiest way is to start from the e to the power 1 approximation. You can look into the Nadlikar's book, which is given there. But I wouldn't say that is the right way of doing. But unfortunately, to get the precision, you will have to do that. Okay. Any questions about this? Okay, so you can do this calculation on your own, then only it might be more clearer. So you can, I'll not compute the numerical value. You can see that this is the precision, the value which you get for the this thing. So when you see that you have a larger mass, then more compact object, and the angular momentum, then you would see that the more and more precision happening. And when the when you have stars like binary neutron star and so on, precision can be very large, which could be seen more cleanly, not in few arc second in century. You could see in a few hours that the major axis is undergoing precision. Okay, so this is one of the classic tests for Einstein's equation, general theory of relativity. Second well-known test is what is known as bending of light. So it is known that the light is affected. You can solve it using the null geodesic. And what happens, interesting, if you have a massive object, and if the light is coming from other side, and that would be slightly bent because of the massive object. I am assuming that this is a weaker gravity. And then if you have a star in the background, okay, if you extrapolate this position, and it would be slightly moved, and you need a massive object to do that, and that is what you require sun. So if you have stars behind the sun, and then you can see its position being slightly displaced than its original position when you observe from Earth because of the gravitational effect or curvature effect around the sun. Unfortunately, you cannot see stars behind the uh, sun because of the sun is so bright and you cannot see the stars. But on the occasion of uh, what you call is a solar eclipse, when the moon covers the sun, you will have sun's main light is blocked, and you will have some corona emitting, which is not very strong, which is roughly like a brightness of a moon. But then you can see stars behind sun, and then you can measure the bending of light. And this experiment was done in 1919 by Arthur Eddington. He took an expedition to measure the bending of light during the total solar eclipse, and then you find that it exactly matches what predicted by Einstein. So this experiment actually contributed enormous to the popularity of the uh, general theory of relativity as well as to Einstein. Einstein became a star overnight with after this confirmation of his theory using by the astronomer, British astronomer Eddington, Sir Arthur Eddington. So Einstein was a German, and this was a British, and this is a time of World War I. And you can see that, in fact, these two were in constant communication, and then they managed to break the political and other barriers to promote the science even at the during the time of war. So let's try to look at that. It is very similar to what we have done in the earlier case. We got to solve the null geodesic, which is currently is a straightforward business, and then find out the orbit for light now, not for the planet, which is a massive particle. So first of the equation is this: T dot is equal to E by 1 minus 2mr, which is coming from the conservation of energy, and then conservation of angular momentum gives the second equation, and the third equation comes from null condition, that is for velocity is 0, and this we get here is a simpler equation than the time light because it is now equate to 0, not 1. So you get this equation. Now we got to convert this into orbit equation. We got to write d phi by dr, that we use this equation and substitute in this as we done before, and then we see that it is straightforward to write as before d square phi d square r a whole square is equal to e square by Lz square, okay, into 1 minus 2mr into 1 by r square. Now, it is a usual convention here to write in terms of impact parameter B as angular momentum per unit energy. So this is a definition of impact parameter. So this gives you is a kind of a nearest distance. It gives you perpendicular distance B impact parameter, and this is the center. Usually in the scattering problem, this is called the impact parameter, and we can rewrite the equation. Everything is nicely factored out here. So there is it is a much simpler than the time-like orbits. So we have d square u plus 1 by r square minus 2m by r cube is equal to 1 by b square. Again, we do the same substitution. U is equal to 1 by r, and du by du is equal to minus dr by r square. When we do this substitution, again equation looks very similar to what we have done, except that there is a one factor is missing because of the null condition. So we can see that du by d phi square, the whole square, okay, into u square is equal to 1 by b square plus 2m u cube. Again, we take differentiate with the phi as we have done for time-like orbit. Then we get a second order orbit equation, d square u by d phi square is plus u is equal to 3m u square. So you can see that we have cancelled one du by d phi as we have done for the time-like orbit, and this is a much simpler to solve. As you can see, it is has a less terms, and then impact parameter does not appear, and then we have to solve this equation. Okay. Any questions so far? No? Going too fast, completely decoupled? This is a bit of an ugly calculation, but it is not as ugly as previous one. So here, again, we'll have to see that the first term here and the second term, which is a nonlinear term. So we got to solve it in a perturbative way. And it is, see that, let's rewrite this. D square u by d phi square plus u is equal to 3m u squared. We can remove the nonlinear term and then try to solve it. So that is a lowest order term, d square u, this 0 plus u0 is equal to 0. So this is a simple harmonic oscillator. There is no source term also. So we can simply write down the solution as some constant into cos phi. We can have a phi naught too, but we can ignore that too. It depends on how you want to define the constant. The phi naught, r naught is one call it closest distance approach. That is what you call when r goes to infinity or u naught goes to 0, then you have a solution as r naught. Then we can do this perturbative solution. You can write u is equal to u naught plus epsilon into u1, and then we do the same trick again. Then we get the perturbed equation. U1 is equal to d phi square plus u1 is equal to 3m by r naught square into cos square phi. Okay, one need to solve this equation. This is again not too bad. It's a simple harmonic oscillator with the source term cos square phi, and that can be easily solved. And then total solution u1 becomes m by r 0 square into 2 minus cos square phi. This is straightforward to write, and then we get the solution. U is equal to 1 by r naught cos phi plus m by r naught square into 2 minus cos square phi. This is what you have is a complete solution with the first order approximation done to the null geodesic when light is coming from far infinity and then seen by an observer. Okay. Any questions so far? I went a bit too fast, but it is very similar to the first case, much simpler way of doing. Any questions? Yes? Okay. So this could be the question which could be asked in the exam. Okay, so let us go ahead and see what happens. Let us look at the case when u is 0 or r going to infinity. Okay, we can see that the phi goes to plus or minus phi naught. That means you have an object here sitting, maybe sun with during the eclipse, and the light coming like this, and then it bend like this, okay, and then it takes an angle, and this you can assume to be phi naught at that point, and then, or it could have a plus or minus value. You could have a this way, and then it coming like this. So including that, you would see that the phi naught would have a value of pi by 2 plus 2g m by r naught. Okay, so this is the solution for the m, and this is what is of angle. Otherwise it would have been pi by 2, that is a object coming towards the u, and it would be slightly changed because of the presence of mass. And if you can find out the angle between this actually is a plus or minus phi naught, and you can find the angle between the two beams, and that is this term multiplied by 2. Delta phi naught is equal to 4m by r naught. That would be the change, or the angle by which light is deflected from the both sides, and that is what you see as a deflection of the sunlight, means star or light seen. So this is a value which has been observed by Eddington, and that is what is being matched with the Einstein's calculation, and this is what led to the second test of a general theory of relativity, where you can see bending of light which is coming from the far off object. There are various interesting things could happen. One of them, what is called, is an Einstein's ring that requires a slightly different calculation. I will just explain what happens. Suppose instead of what we have done in this case is we have a parallel light coming like this, and one which are very close to the surface of the sun, and we have calculated how much it bends. That is what corresponds to phi naught is equal to pi by 2 plus 2m by r naught. Otherwise, if sun is not there, it would have been simply pi by 2, and then it bends, and that is what we have found. There could be an interesting situation in which what you have is a massive object sitting here, and then there is a point object at some stage, and then there is an observer which is watching from infinity, and you could have a light which is going and then coming back, and then it is coming here, and then from here too, and then this could form an image, okay, because these two rays which are coming from the point object getting bent and meets back again at this point, and when that happens, that is what we call is a lens, and this is called the gravitational lens, where images can be formed depending on this object is moved a little bit here, here, or here. You could see images 1, 2, or 3, or they always come in some kind of a pair. So that is what we call is gravitational lensing. In astrophysics, this has been observed several times, and that is what we call is gravitational lensing. And there is one case in which when these objects are completely aligned, as I have shown here, and then you have a dark object or this massive object, and then it fully forms the ring around this. Light emitted from this would from all around comes and meets here, and you would see a ring like image, and that is called the Einstein's ring. So this is Einstein himself predicted it. That is why I called it is Einstein's ring. But he never thought it is possible to observe this. But this has been observed several times because of the faraway galaxies which are being lensed by some other massive object, such as centers of other galaxies. When they are aligned perfectly, then you would get Einstein's ring. So all these are considered as a test to the general theory of relativity, and this theory has passed this test in bright colors, and that is why it is called one of the most successful theory of gravity. Okay, so these are the classic tests for the Einstein gravity. So any questions? No questions? Okay, if there are no questions, let me stop here and we will continue on Thursday. Thursday would be tutorial. So now there don't seems to be a much difference between the tutorial and the lecture itself. So, but anyway, tutorial will solve the exact some problem which you need to solve yourself and upload. That is remains for the tutorial. So we'll Thursday go with the tutorial and continue on Thursday.